The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Have you ever wondered what those words really mean? Stay tuned.
I'm Dr. James Markham. Are you interested in discovering the reason why? Do you want solutions to your healthcare problem? Are you tired of taking medications? Well, you're about to be given the ultimate prescription.
God built a rest cycle into everything created. Even our hearts enjoy a minute rest period between beats. The problem is that so many of us think that rest really isn't necessary. You know who you are. When was the last time you took a vacation? Trouble is, our beating hearts can take a real beating when we ignore this law of health. Right, Dr. Markham?
Absolutely, Charles. And I love the way you said how our hearts take, even the heart itself takes rest. Yeah. And we call that rest period, we call that diastole. That's a time when the heart rests. It's not for a very long period of time. But as we discovered in looking at all these treatments and all these laws that God's given us because He loves us so much, there is a law of rest that must be kept. And, let's give some examples here. In the old days, before we had all this modern technology in cardiovascular disease, if someone had a heart attack or heart failure, we used to bed rest them.
Yeah.
We used to say, listen, you rest, don't do anything, let the body rest, let it heal. If you had a racehorse, Charles, okay, and you raced that horse race after race after race, you would sooner or later let that horse rest, or you wear it out.
You have to.
Exactly. If you broke your arm throwing fastballs, you would let your arm rest. You wouldn't keep throwing fastballs. If you talked all the time, Charles, you'd run out of words sooner or later and you'd have to rest.
Yes.
When we don't rest, when we violate this law, even the Lord of the universe, who didn't have any health problems, He knew that He designed us to rest.
Yeah.
Work 6 days, have a rest cycle. The research is just now understanding a little bit more about this 6-day work cycle, then rest 1 day. But God knows a lot about it, and I can't wait to talk to Him about how this cycle was meant to be, because we know it's true.
We have to believe that if God did it, there was a reason why He did it. 6 days on, 1 day off. We may not understand it now, but it's got to be a reason for being that way.
Absolutely. And if I had the money to fund a study, what I would do is I would take maybe 10 or 15,000 people, and I would match them up, perfect matches.
Yeah.
And I would have one that worked 7 days a week, that worked hard all the time, busy 24/7, that watched TV, that stayed up late at night, that never rested, that kept go.
Yeah.
Got to work hard, got to achieve the almighty dollar, got to stay busy.
Yeah.
And then I take another group that specifically rested 1 day a week. Within that group, I would like to have a group that would not only rest 1 day, but would rest, and have another group within that group would rest in worship.
Oh, my.
And teach them different ways to worship. And then I would like to study a lot of different parameters. Blood pressure, heart rate, inflammation, disease rates, all these inflammatory, stress-related problems that we have. And I would like to study those different groups and see who had the best chemistry at the end of the period. I think, based on everything I know what the results would be.
Yes, you would.
It's inherently logical. And I think that study will be done someday, and we'll be able to prescribe a weekly rest for people, as well as some of these other things that we prescribe. Just like we give people that have a heart attack a beta blocker, I would like to give them a prescription for a day of rest. And add worship to that. So there's something remarkable about resting that it does. It gives our body a chance to catch up, a chance to heal. But not only our bodies, Charles, our control centers have a chance to rest. Our brains need rest time to rejuvenate the neurons and neural pathways. We need downtime. You can't think all the time. And we have some literature behind this. We know that people that are studying for tests, the people that learn slowly and have rest times assimilate that better than people that just study all the time, that cram for tests and that. So we also know that this rest is important for our brain, and that brain is our control center of the whole body. So that rest is also important for our brain function, which controls everything.
So we're not only talking about resting our muscles, we're also talking about resting our brain up here. You said something significant there, that there is a rest, a Sabbath rest, and the Bible makes it very clear that God created a rest day. And the Bible says that God rested on that day. But then we have to say, well, how did he do that? What did Adam and Eve do on that rest day? Yes, they rested, but there was something else significant that happened on that day that I think that we can replicate in our own lives, and we should replicate if we want to make sure we have that full benefit of the rest. And it is, they rested, but they also spent some time with God.
Yes.
Is that really an important part of this?
Well, you know, it must be, because God set it up at the beginning.
Yes.
And who are we to question
We
God?
have got to start believing in our own hearts that when God does something, there's a reason for it, and that reason is good for us.
Even though we can't always explain it scientifically.
Yeah.
Now, let's think about the other thing. He said not to work. Well, you know, that's a good thing. But during that day, they spent one on a special time where they had together, where they worshiped and praised. They developed this friendship even more. They had special time to share with each other and to learn each other. And during this time, I'm sure Adam and Eve learned about these principles that God set up the universe. They learned about love. They developed love between the two. And as that love developed, the chemistry got better. They helped understand this. But at the same time, they always had that choice to love or not to love. And I think that was an important part about this rest. And this was set up at the beginning of time on our earth.
Yes.
And God knew this was important. Very important, not only for our brains, for our spiritual life, for our relationship with the ultimate physician, as well as ways to keep us healthy. Now, likewise, now here we go again. You've heard this before in previous programs. When we do what God says, our chemistry gets better.
Yes.
It improves because that was God's way.
Yeah.
But if we don't do what God says, if we don't rest, if we don't take that time to be with Him, if we don't take that special love relationship time, inherently our chemistry gets worse.
Yeah.
And if I was the evil one, I would want to take us away from our rest. I would want us to worship everything else. I would want us to worship football games and fancy houses and jobs and internet, worship everything else but the true God. And as I got them away from truth, I would damage their chemistry so their brains wouldn't work right, so they wouldn't even be able to think correctly. That reminds me of a study. There's a doctor at the University of Pennsylvania that's doing studies on brains. And what he does, Charles, is he takes MRIs and looks at brains, the metabolic activity. That's what MRIs do. And he has took some people and he had them worship for a short period of time every day, and then he scanned their brains with his MRIs both before and after worship at the University of Pennsylvania. So this is a scientific study. After a short period of worship time, he demonstrated that the front part of the brain, the part that communicates with God, the thinking part, started to grow. So that part...
Physically grow?
Yes, it started to grow, become more developed.
Yeah.
So he is proving that worship, just like God said, is developing the front part of our brain, the good part of our brain, where we communicate with God. So worship is a treatment for the development of our brain. Conversely, when we don't worship, when we don't rest, it stresses our bodies, including our brain. The stress part of our brain, the limbic system and all those fancy parts there, become overly developed. We can't make rational decisions. We think on that part of our brain, and the front part of our brain becomes smaller and less useful. We know, and we see this in literature. We see people that take drugs and a lot of other stressors. The part of the brain that does the thinking looks like cheddar cheese sometimes. So this is some strong data that what God said at the very beginning, when we take a day of rest, when we develop this worship with Him on that day of rest, we have some important chemical implications as well as love implications.
So, Dr. Markham, could we safely say that if we are struggling with our relationship with God, if we are saying, I can't seem to connect with Him, I can't seem to get through, and I can't seem to find Him in my life, is it possible that the reason is that we are not developing that part of our brain where God communicates with us, and that the answer for that is to develop that part of our brain? Don't wait for God just to simply come busting in and make changes. We need to create a change in our brain patterns where God can actually be part of our lives and communicate with us.
Charles, I'm proud of you. You know, you're getting this good. Sometimes you don't get my name right, but you're definitely getting this right, Charles. You've got this, and I'm so proud, and I'm hoping our our listeners and viewers get this as well.
Yes.
Because as we communicate with God, there's a text in the Bible, create and meet a new heart, create and meet a new brain. How does this happen? It's from that relationship with the Holy Spirit that trains our brains, so maybe the things we used to like, we don't like.
Yes.
Maybe the things that we used to do no longer is fun for us to do. And we can only do that power through the Holy Spirit. And that's why we want to talk about this as treatment in this healing plan. And sometimes I feel like we don't talk about it. We talk about all the fancy stuff, the treatments for cancer. We talk about the blood pressure medicines, the blood thinners. We talk about how important it is to exercise and eat all the right foods. Sometimes we do that at the expense of everything else.
Yes, yes.
But when we talk about this relationship, the way that we get the power to do things for the right reasons, to change our brain, to grow our brain, to be in part of our brain, to change us, to be in us, that is the key. That is the key to changing our chemistry. We do it for the right reasons. So that's why this day of rest, this worship, is so important. And now we're proving it scientifically. This isn't a bunch of theories that's just thrown out. This is something you can take to the bank. It's true. You can believe it. Yeah. And that's why I'm trying to incorporate into a treatment plan this idea of rest and this idea of worship. And people worship in many different ways. You know, some people worship in church. Some people worship in prayer. Some people worship out in nature. You know, the original church was a garden.
Yes.
And I think I do my best communing with God when I'm out in nature. I had one fella, he says he worships in a fishing boat. You know?
In a fishing boat.
He worships in a fishing boat.
All
but
right.
you know, the point is we connect with God, He connects with us in that relationship. And that's the important thing, and that's what we're trying to get through. And I think God was telling us it's important for our physical, mental, and spiritual health to follow this law that He created the universe to be run on.
You know, Dr. Markham, one of the most amazing things in my mind is a scene that I like to go to often. And that is that scene on the seventh day of creation when Adam and Eve were walking through the garden and the Lord joined them. And they were enjoying the beauty, and they were seeing the birds, and they were hearing the tinkle of the water in the stream and the fish, and everything was there. On that seventh day of creation, at that moment, everything they needed to be healthy existed. It was right there. Nothing was missing. God's health plan was in place and complete at that moment. The further we get away from that moment, from that health plan, the sicker we become. The closer we get back to that moment, into that health plan, health returns to us.
Absolutely.
We have a say in how healthy we are by following what God has said and done for us. We'll be back in just a minute, so stay tuned.
But sooner or later, let that horse rest, so you wear it out.
You have to.
Exactly. If you broke your arm throwing fastballs, you would let your arm rest. You wouldn't keep throwing fastballs. If you talked all the time, Charles, you'd run out of words sooner or later and you'd have to rest.
Yes, yes.
When we don't rest, when we violate this law, even the Lord of the universe, who didn't have any health problems, He knew that He designed us to rest.
Yeah.
Work 6 days, have a rest cycle.
Last time you took a vacation. Trouble is, our beating hearts can take a real beating when we ignore this law of health. Right, Dr. Markham?
Absolutely, Charles. And I love the way you said how our hearts take, even the heart itself takes
heart itself.
Rest. Yeah. And we call that rest period, we call that diastole. That's a time when the heart rests. It's not for a very long period of time. But as we discovered in looking at all these treatments and all these laws, are you interested in discovering the reason why? Do you want solutions to your healthcare problem? Are you tired of taking medications? Well, you're about to be given the ultimate prescription.
God built a rest cycle into everything created. Even our hearts enjoy a minute rest period between beats. The problem is that so many of us think that rest really isn't necessary. You know who you are. When was the
laws that God's given us because He loves us so much? There is a law of rest that must be kept. And, you know, let's give some examples here. You know, in the old days, before we had all this modern technology in cardiovascular disease, if someone had a heart attack or heart failure, we used to bed rest them.
Yeah.
We used to say, listen, you rest, don't do anything, let the body rest, let it heal. If you had a racehorse, Charles, okay, and you raced that horse race after race after race,
The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Have you ever wondered what those words really mean? Stay tuned.
I'm Dr. James Markham.